Claire. This is Councilor Surratt's on the phone.
Claire, glad to know you're on the phone. And we are also expecting Greg on the phone. Is he?
Remember?
Haven't heard yet.
He didn't get out till 12.
Oh, right. Oh, that's right. Thank you for reminding me. So welcome to our final work session of 2018. We're going to really go out in full force with a really, really busy, full of conversation work session. So first, so I am really going to try and hold us very tightly to time. We will wrap this first discussion up within 45 minutes, I hope, and I'm going to be diligent, and if I have to cut people to 2 minutes, I'm going to do that just so that we can get through things. So with that, I will turn it over to staff to talk about the Dusk to Dawn.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. We're returning today. You might recall that the last work session that we had with you was on the 28th of November. And at that point, we came to talk to you about Lane County's request to have the site at 525 Highway 99 cited for a Dusk to Dawn or potential rest stop. So today we're returning with more information about that. And in addition, we also want to answer some of the questions that you have. And you will see that you have some handouts that were at your spots, and we will be using those as tools as we walk through this presentation. So our agenda really is just to remind us of the purpose that we're trying to accomplish with the various programs that we have. We'll give an update on some of the day center research that you asked about in terms of best practices. We'll talk a little bit about where we are with evaluating and car camping and rest stop siting. And then Becky will spend quite a bit of time talking about Dusk to Dawn and Lindholm, especially as it relates to Highway 99. And then at the end, if you choose so, there'll be an opportunity to take potential action on that item. So the purpose in terms of what we've been trying to accomplish over the course of the last several months and looking for sightings for the Dusk to Dawn, day center, rest stop, car camping, all of those things has remained the same. We're wanting to create more opportunities to have a warm and welcoming place for people, for individuals that are unhoused to access during the day and the evening hours and in some situations, nighttime. We're looking for creating a more access to services and needs of trying to help move people along the continuum of need for support and housing. And as mentioned, daytime access, and then increasing sleeping options. And a lot of what you heard on Monday night for people that were here to speak is the importance of rest and sleep and helping people get back on their feet. This is a familiar diagram, I hope. It is from the work of the Technical Assistance Collaborative, the TAC report that you received a brief overview and will be receiving a fuller presentation in January. And what we intend to do is kind of, as we're talking, to always remind people of what area of that continuum that we're referring to. So in the lower left-hand corner where it says alternative to shelter options, the things that we'll be talking about today are in that area, if you will, of the service system, meaning that it's emergency services that are intended to be temporary while we're continuing to work through filling the gap that we have in this community for shelter and low barrier shelter access and supported systems that move us beyond the emergency need. So with the day center, you should have you asked for additional information around best practices. And so we've put together one sheet. So does everybody have one of these at their spot? Okay. So what this captures is some research that was done. Some of it we've been collecting along the way, and then some of it is some new research that we've gathered over the last couple of weeks. And what we put together was something that really captures what some of the best practices are, lessons learned in doing some siting around day centers. I will say that as we were out talking to people, there's a blend of things that people are doing. Some of them just have a day center, some of them have a shelter and a day center together, and some of them have more of a campus approach, the larger focus like the San Antonio model that you've heard us refer to. Some key things that were takeaways from that, and I think that we have learned from our experience around outreach and engagement. Public engagement is a key component, and in places what we learned from talking with some folks is that the more outreach and engagement you have on the front end is very helpful. What also people said is that sometimes we don't have the time to do as much as we would like to do on the front end. And so in those situations, they have been very proactive on the back end. One agency that we spoke to talked about some of the good neighbor contracts that they're creating to really help build understanding about not only what the purpose of the camp or the siting of the shelter is, but sort of those shared expectations, like a social contract, if you will, around helping it be successful for everybody within the area and within the shelter. In addition, it talked about the services provided, so we collected a lot of information on this. And again, this is just a real snapshot of what we've gathered. And then also talked a little bit about cultivating plans, when we think about the continuum of kind of how things move, when we think about the TAC report and the diagram that we showed is that we're always moving towards something. And what we're hoping is that people are continually moving to new spaces within that continuum and not staying at one. So for example, our temporary sites that we have with respect to rest stops, car camping, and dusk to dawn are intended to be a stopover point, a place where people can garner access to services so we can understand what the needs are and help them continue to move through the different housing options that are available or shelter options that are available. So this is just some information. We're happy to answer questions that you may have, but just wanted to let you know that these are some of the best practices. And in light of time today, I'm not delving as deep as we could have on this topic. So the other thing that we continue to work on with in kind of three different ways. One is that the rest stops. And so we know that our rest stops are at capacity, that what we know is that they've been successful. And one of the ways that they've been really successful is when we've been able to do a lot of community outreach around and setting, again, of expectations. So it's a little bit like some of the research that we received in terms of how to set something up for success. In addition, the site is really important, making sure that we have a site that, doesn't get too wet during the winter and maybe provides access to water. And so a lot of those factors are considered as we're evaluating sites. Right now we have 3 teams that are on various levels talking about rest stop sites. One of them is our homeless policy team that's made up of several members of our executive leadership team as well as staff that work closely in these program areas. The other group that's working on rest stop siting options and feasibility of different sites is a City of Eugene and Lane County team that's looking at that. And then the third option, or the third way that we've been looking at this is that our staff team has been talking with our service providers, different service providers, Whitebird, CSS, and considering other options that might be available. One of the things that as we consider options moving forward, we also have to make sure that we have a service system that can support itself, meaning that we have to have contracts with people to help us provide for the safety, security, and well-maintained service areas, and to make sure that we also have those support services in place. So that's a real critical component. With respect to car camping, we understand that that's also an interest and has been a successful program. One of the things I will say is while we're looking for site options, our fire department has stepped up and said that they're also looking at their stations to see if they can accommodate, like 1 or 2 campers. And so we're looking not only at external sites, but really trying to look within what we have available and think about the uses of our sites in different ways. So with that, I'll turn it over to Becky.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. When we last discussed this topic, you asked for some additional information about the Dusk to Dawn program, and so we have provided that information in the form of a Q&A FAQ that you have before you as well. I'll also take a minute just to kind of highlight what some of the basics of that program are. Dusk to Dawn provides overnight safe sleeping in MASH-style tents housing about 16 to 20 individuals each. Tents are heated and individual sleeping pads or cots are provided for each of the participants. And the current Dusk to Dawn site has been successfully operating since 2015. One of the primary questions that we received was where do people go during the day if they're not at the Dusk to Dawn site? The Dusk to Dawn site is open between the hours of 5 p.m. and 8 a.m. The participants check in either in person or via telephone between 5 and 6 p.m. Then they're asked to be at the site by 9 p.m. However, accommodations are made for those that have jobs and need to arrive later. During the day, Dusk to Dawn sleeping site is closed, so the participants agree to vacate the site and the surrounding area during those hours. However, they are welcome at the Lindholm Center throughout the day. As we've thought about what services the campers at Highway 99 are currently accessing at the Lindholm Center, we wanted to be sure that they will continue to get their basic needs met. So everyone that uses the Lindholm Center receives meals, showers, laundry, food boxes, clothing vouchers, telephone and computer access, and other things such as sleeping bags and hygiene products. Dusk to Dawn participants will also have access to service providers, including a housing navigator. In addition, the Lindholm Center will be extending their hours from 5 to 9 p.m. to allow Dusk to Dawn participants more hours to access these services as well. There's also been questions about what happens during the nighttime operations. At the site, once someone is checked in at the site, they can hang out quietly anywhere within the site in the sleeping tents or in the common area. Lights do go out at the sleeping tents at 9:15 p.m. to allow those that want to sleep an opportunity to sleep. However, other site participants, if they aren't ready to sleep at that time, do have open areas where they can quietly hang out together, and including a smoking area. Wake-up time is around 7 a.m., and the tents are closed at 8 a.m. Those who are participating are served breakfast at the Lindholm Center if they so choose in the morning. The current 525 Highway 99 camp is located on Lane County property. The county is asking council to designate that site as a Dusk to Dawn site. The purpose is to serve as many people as possible in a safe, secure, and well-managed environment. We recognize that the Dusk to Dawn model may not be a fit for everyone, and we want to ensure that all of the campers at the current 99 camp have an opportunity to be connected to services that may be a better fit for their needs. We also recognize the importance of a smooth transition for those campers who do choose to participate in the Dusk to Dawn program. To meet both of these objectives, we've worked closely with the county and St. Vincent de Paul to develop a transition plan. Outreach to the current campers has been ongoing. However, we do have some additional concerted outreach efforts that are planned for next week. Staff from Lane County, St. Vincent de Paul, Shelter Care, Laurel Hill Center, the Eugene Mission, Dovetail, and Supportive Services for Veterans Families will be actively engaging camp residents with an intent to connect them to services next week. They will also be doing health needs assessments and also have some outreach efforts for those individuals whose needs may not fit the Dusk to Dawn model. Public Health will be providing health education as well as vaccinations, and camp members will also have the opportunity to sign up for Dusk to Dawn. If approved by council, the transition to the Dusk to Dawn model is planned for the first couple of weeks in January. The final date will be communicated to the campers next week if it is approved. Individuals who've signed up for Dusk to Dawn will be given temporary shelter at the Lindholm Center during the 4 to 5 days that it takes to transition the site to a Dusk to Dawn, and they will receive assistance in transporting their goods back and forth between the sites. Day centers services at the Lindholm Center will continue to be available, and the Dusk to Dawn will meet the and it is our hope that the combination of social services, outreach, and Dusk to Dawn will meet the needs of all of the campers who choose to engage in these services. We do believe that moving to a Dusk to Dawn program meets the goals of a safe, secure, and well-managed site and accomplishes the original purposes we've established for these programs. If approved for the program, the cost will be shared with Lane County, and because of the proximity to the Lindholm Center, the services provided to the participants will actually exceed those that we anticipated would have happened on the City Hall site. The total anticipated cost for this model will be around $166,000 for operations and $58,000 one-time cost for some infrastructure. At this time, the recommended motion includes designating the site as both the Dusk to Dawn and rest stop siting to provide us maximum flexibility for using that site. However, the more timely ask is related to the Dusk to Dawn approval. So at this.
Yeah. Mayor, if I may add one more thing. So I just also want to remind council that the 525 site is a Lane County site. And so should council choose not to have the site operate as a Dusk to Dawn, I believe there's still a transition plan that needs to happen, as the initial movement over was a 30 to 60 day strategy as a short-term measure to to transition to something that, again, would provide for the safety and security and the needs of those at the camp.
I have Mike in the queue, and I'll take questions from others, but I just, one other point that we heard concerns on Monday night about where people's possessions could be stored during the day. Could you address that?
Certainly. The Dusk to Dawn has some cubicle areas that are locked at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, and those who are participating have access to that. At night, they're limited in what they can take into the tents. However, during the day, they can take whatever they want from those cubicles when they have access to it in the morning. There's also space for if somebody has a shopping cart or a bike trailer, there's also space for storage for that as well.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. I have Mike in the queue. Other questions? Jennifer?
Yeah.
Alan?
I heard most of that. I apologize. There's an awful lot of materials here we just got, and I'm trying to sort through all of this and hear you, and forgive me if I ask a question that you just covered. Number one, who will be in charge of management of the Dusk to Dawn facility?
St. Vincent de Paul.
Okay. Is there someone other than us managing it in that has been, because we discussed this, in charge of the facility as it exists right now as a camp?
Well, ultimately, it's Lane County's property. They do have some operating agreements with St. Vincent de Paul, but Lane County and St. Vincent de Paul have an agreement around the operations and liability for that site.
I get that's a very legal answer. I understand that entirely, but there's no one on site or anything like it that's actively managing it. They just got a different model than, say, we used in other camping circumstances.
There's not an on-site active manager 24/7,
Okay.
but there are designated staff. So from our team, from the City of Eugene team, Lieutenant Doug Mozan is a liaison to the camp and goes by there pretty much every day.
Yep.
There's a lot of staff that are helping work to support the success of that camp.
But it's
in the
not a
short term.
private group that's doing it. It's
No,
us.
no, sir.
Thank you. But you've had discussions sufficient to know that you can and will contract with St. Vincent de Paul if it's a Dusk to Dawn facility.
That is correct.
What's the contingency plan for all of the people who will leave that site when we change the designation? As we heard the other night during public testimony, there's quite an awful lot of people that will come back down here and try and camp downtown. Do we have a contingency plan for dealing with that?
Well, what the intention is of the people that are working at the camp, as Becky talked about, so we believe that the camp will accommodate up to 80 people that are interested in being part of that program that fits for them. What we're also going to do is that extensive triage outreach to see if there are other means of programs that can help serve their needs. And so at this point, I don't have a count of what that looks like moving forward. We'll have more information about that as we move through that triage process. But our hope is to help people find programs and spaces that work for them. So.
I appreciate that very much. That's a good answer. Mine, though, is a little different of a question than that. For example, and I'll get into some specifics. I heard, I think, 3 people say that they had no intention to stay if it was a Dusk to Dawn facility and that they wanted to reestablish a place downtown to camp in illegally. Number 2, I know of at least 4 people, or at least from secondhand stories, I have heard of at least 4 people and probably several more who are camping out at the current facility who are banned for life from St. Vincent de Paul's facilities. So I know that at least some of those folks are coming down here. So rather than just displace the problem, to vote in favor of this, I just want to know what the contingency plans are to deal with what we know will take place next.
I think there's a couple things. One is, Becky and Christy mentioned, we do have very active groups trying to look for rest stop areas. So that's if we can identify rest stops, that might be an option for them. What we don't know is, are any of the folks that you may be familiar with or others, as we go through that triage process, there may be other places that are available that they would then choose to go to differently. If people come downtown, what our intention is to, as we've always done when people choose to come downtown and camp, we try to work with them and find other places for them to be and to spend the night.
Okay, I appreciate that. With 1 minute left, I guess I will just say, is it our intent to continue to enforce illegal camping even when it's considered a protest camp?
Catherine can talk about, why don't you talk about the protest part?
There's two different questions, and it's multifaceted, because where they're located, what property they are on, makes many differences. For example, a park closes at 11 o'clock for me and you and anybody else. So the question of some First Amendment questions, it's a different answer. So it really is very fact-specific. The butterfly lot wasn't our property, so there was an approach and a specific answer to that. So there's not, I'm reticent to try to do a one-size-fits-all for the different types of property, different ownerships of property.
Right, and I appreciate that. I'm not asking about the legality so much as our intentions.
Our intentions is to enforce illegal camping.
That's my answer. Thank you.
Jennifer?
Thank you. First, I want to thank you guys. I mean, obviously, this has been a long-term problem, and we don't expect you to solve it at this one spot. So thank you for the work you guys are doing. So I have a couple questions. The first question is, what did the county, so I know the county is responsible for moving these people, so what were the folks told when they were moved? Do we know exactly what they were told? Or what was their expectation?
Becky and I were not there at the time they were transitioning. We had other staff members that were participating, some people from the police department, and other people from our office. But my understanding is that from the time that they transitioned, in talking with our Lane County partners, it was very clear that this was a 30 to 60-day transitionary camp, and while we worked to a more stable solution.
So not a lot of specifics. It was more of a timeline discussion.
At that time, I don't know that we were kind of moving from that transition period into looking at what the more structured site would look like. So I don't know, there weren't any formulated ideas exactly about which way to go. We knew what programs had been successful in the past and knew that that would be a path that we'd be taking a look at.
Right. Yeah, and I think, Dusk to Dawn has worked for some people. It's very efficient. It's space efficient. It's financially efficient. It doesn't work for all folks, though, as we've heard Monday night, obviously. So I'm wondering, what are the main problems with the camp as it is that we're solving by switching it to a Dusk to Dawn?
Well, right now, the way that the camp is running is that it's, as I said, we have liaisons to the camp. We have support that's happening on a weekly basis, sometimes a daily basis, to help support the needs of the campers. And so and that's being done right now by city and county staff primarily. So we're hoping as we transition that those needs will be supported in a more structured way by the provider. And in this case, that provider would be St. Vincent de Paul, and to help address the needs. The other thing is that there have been calls for service to the camp. And so we've been addressing those. Some of those have been medical related. Some of those have been activity related or behavior based. And so we're also working to address those. And what we're hoping is our experience with the Dusk to Dawn program and with the rest stops, quite frankly, is that the calls for service are extremely low, as it's a very well-managed program.
Right, so I guess what you're saying is currently the structure is not good enough, so.
The structure is intended to be temporary, so there's not an on-site manager and a single point of person that's responsible for the site. So what this will, in terms of creating a safe and secure, and again, that whole managed piece around the maintenance of the site, the provider would be responsible for doing that. So not to say that there aren't some good things happening. I think that the group of people that are out there are doing their best with the situation that they're in. And what we're wanting to do is to make sure that we provide a better longer-term structure as we move through the winter. There are a lot of, as I mentioned, a lot of needs. So while they're there, they're also accessing the Lindholm Center. We know that many of the campers are using those resources, so we know that that's a good plan as we think about moving forward to maintain that level of support and access to meals, laundry, showers, and things like that. So it's it's not, doesn't have an on-site leader, a designated point person on that site. But there is this structure that's been put in place to help them have access to those services. And then we want to provide more structure on the Dusk to Dawn site for the sleeping to provide that as well.
Right. So could some of these issues not be solved by just having an on-site manager and the site doesn't need to necessarily be a Dusk to Dawn situation?
And Catherine, you can correct me if I misspeak, but my understanding is when we've gone to, for instance, a Nightingale, a lot of work is done to create a more of a self-directed site to address the liability concerns and insurance needs, and to also make sure that the work that goes into setting that up for success has a lot to do with how the site needs to be managed and oversight. And so that is not an option. I'll just be honest, that's not an option that we explored significantly as we looked at options. And but it's more of that rest stop model in terms of success, in terms of thinking about how you move forward with that. Is there anything you want to add, Catherine?
No, I would say regarding on the liability component, I mean, as the counties, the property owners, with the two programs that are established right now, there are all of the kind of checks and balances in place, including the agreement and insurance that the county as the property owner would have within the existing program that have been previously established.
And we just don't have that structure set up yet. So it's not that we couldn't do it, it's just that we just haven't had the time to put something together that could facilitate that.
So the two programs that we're talking about, the Rest Stop and the Dusk to Dawn, are code amendments, and they went through. So it's not these aren't policies; they're actually council established code provisions that started as pilot programs. Both of them started as pilot programs, and then were made permanent after their success was proven. So it was actually a fairly methodical process that was followed. So absolutely, there could be a third one that we would anticipate would follow a similar track of if there's a third model that we want to include as under the umbrella of these programs. But these two are the policies that council landed on.
Right. I get that this is the easiest way to make something official, and it has a structure, and we understand it, and we can fund it. It's the easiest probably way to do it. But it seems like our goal in the downtown, which was different, honestly, it's winter, and we need to get as many people somewhere safe and warm as humanly possible. And so we have this space, which is not perfect, but is creating a place, a home for people who don't have any other options, and quite a number of them. And it sounds like there are some issues. I mean, there were some businesses that had some legitimate concerns, and we want to take care of that because, like you said, we're looking for rest stop locations. I'm looking in my neighborhood, and if that's what people see in the news, they're not going to be as receptive. And so we can't have that going on because that's going to cause negative reactions from folks in their own neighborhoods. But I'd really hate to kick a bunch of people out of a place where they've created a home if there's any way at all that we can make this work. We're getting the TAC report back January 22nd, which is literally right around the corner. Hopefully some really great information about how we can make good decisions on how we deal with our homeless population. And I would just hate to make this huge change. It just seems, if there's any way we can just wait and see if we can find a way to make this work. I don't know, you guys feel like that's not possible? It sounds like.
Anything is possible.
I like to hear that.
Well, but I would say that we're at a point where there needs to be more structure at the site. I mean, we're getting more concern, and we're hearing it from the business owners and hearing it from staff that are helping support the camp, is that they're concerned about the long-term safety and viability of the camp in its existing form. Does it mean that if we go to a remember this Dusk to Dawn is intended, the funding that Becky talked about is to provide for up to 80 people through April, and then we would consider what is the next best step. So it's a short-term interim strategy, and it doesn't mean that while we're transitioning to this short-term strategy that we can't be working on another one as well. I mean, that's our intent. We're continually working on a lot of different options and willing to sit down and talk to people about what might be available.
Alan?
Can I get in the queue, Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Compare this to the size of the downtown Old City Hall site in terms of number of people.
Sure. This Dusk to Dawn site is anticipated for up to 80 people, and the downtown City Hall would have been for up to 60 people, and it would have been the same Dusk to Dawn sleeping type of arrangement.
Basically the same thing, just a little bigger.
Bigger, correct.
And in cooperation with Lane County.
Correct.
Continue that. So that means 80 down, 1,000 to go, basically. But this is a bunch of little steps adding up to a lot. You went over the costs really quickly. 166,000.
Correct, yeah. 166,900 would be the city's portion of operating this through April. And then we did anticipate, in anticipation of the City Hall site, we purchased some of the tent and heater, et cetera, infrastructure. And so we do have a cost of about 58,000 for that as well.
What's the operational share for our partner Lane County?
It's equal, correct.
Okay. And we already spent all that infrastructure cost already.
Yes, we
We already
have
bought
the
all
budget
that,
for that.
all that stuff. Can you go back to the tent picture? So where's the heaters? Is it
There are,
that one way back at the end there?
not 100% certain, I think there's a vent there at the end. So there's a generator with a vent that heats the tents, and then there's a hard surface floor.
And then these are mattresses.
Yes, cots or
Somewhere
mattresses.
in there is a heating system.
Correct.
What kind of mattresses?
Cots, there's some cots and
Oh,
some of them in
cots and
mattresses.
Okay, okay. I'm a little bit concerned about the Lindholm Center and its capacity. Have we talked to St. Vincent de Paul, and how are they managing so far?
Sure.
And I can't imagine this isn't stressing the Lindholm Center pretty significantly.
Correct.
Will continue to, and how are they going to operate that with another Dusk to Dawn site across the street?
So we've been in conversation with the Lindholm Center, and they have let us know that they have not had to turn anyone away. They do have an additional tent outside at the Lindholm Center. That's an option for people to spend time at. And the city and the county have worked together with the Lindholm Center to help fund some of the additional capacity that's needed, because they did see an increase in individuals accessing the services at the center in November when the camp began.
Okay, so they're able to handle it.
Correct.
That's good to hear, because there's some really valuable services that occur there, and for folks that are looking for that. There's a motion in front of us. This is staff proposal. It's and there's a and/or a rest stop. What does the and/or mean? What's the intent of doing that?
It was just to provide maximum flexibility. That's the same motion that you saw a couple weeks ago. So as the site and plans for the site, because both of the programs require council approval to operate either or both, we felt that if you could provide that maximum flexibility with one motion, that would be the easiest.
But we don't have any intention right now to do a rest stop there. It's a Dusk to Dawn facility.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. And then there are going to be people displaced by this proposal, which brings up for me the other part of the downtown proposal, which was a day center. So what's the status of that? I know we've been looking, other people, we've been doing a lot of work that isn't in front of the public eye. So you can go over that and trying to find a place that where a day center could be located. And I know some of the businesses downtown in the chamber have been trying to help with that as well. So maybe you could describe that process and the status of it and when we might see something come of that.
So what we've been doing is really looking to evaluate sites. So there's some sites that we've evaluated, some that we went to that were brought forward by, business owners or interested parties in trying to help solve the problem or fill the gap, if you will. And some of them are feasible, some of them require a lot of investment, and others we just really need to continue to work through. In some cases, some of the spaces that we're looking at are already being used for other purpose, and so it may align with some other program needs that we have. So we are in progress in looking at that. I know our partners at the Chamber are interested in helping be part of that conversation. And as we hear from homeless advocates, there's an interest in there. And we've been talking with some of the homeless advocates as well as more specifically the service providers for homeless to help us in continuing to find a location. We're also interested in bringing people together to help solve this challenge that we have, and we recognize that there is a growing need for being able to provide something like that. We're still really interested in the idea of a 40 winks type option, which would provide people a place to nap or sleep for a few hours during the day. There's no doubt that rest and sleep are really important in terms of people, their overall health and success, and so we want to find ways to support that. One of the things that I've been giving a lot of thought to and the team has been considering is, are there micro ways to go about solving this problem? So we tend to approach this as a kind of a big strategy to fill a big gap at one location, but maybe there's some things we could do at the micro level where we can find a few spots here and a few spots here, and it's not as clearly defined as a large space, but we're also considering those options as well as to try to keep things moving forward.
Sounds a lot like silver buckshot to me.
Point that this way, please. God.
Yeah. And, well, you know, it's almost a no-brainer to me that if you don't want people hanging out in the downtown, you got to have a place for them to go. So if they don't have a place to go, and they've got constitutional rights that doesn't allow us to just arrest them and put them in jail, which we don't do to any homeless people, by the way, unless they do something much more egregious. So if I applaud all the efforts that are going on to find a day center in the downtown area, because I think that's part of the solution to get towards the issues that are downtown, and for having people have a place to either take naps, like the 40 winks idea. But so I think that's something that should be a high priority for us to try to figure out.
Okay, Emily, then Claire, then Betty, yeah.
Thank you. I have a bunch of questions sort of in random order. If it does become a dusk to dawn, then who's in charge of it? We have to say okay, but is it the city's in charge or the county's in charge or some third entity?
To come under the umbrella of our actual program, the city just needs to approve this, the site functioning that way. It would be the county contracting with St. Vincent de Paul.
So if we don't do it, then it's all on the county to manage it and pay for it, or, I mean, we can't, whatever they do there, it won't be a dusk to dawn.
It won't be under our program with our structure, correct, yes.
So, we already spent $58,000. This would cost another $167,000. Is that part of the $300,000 we approved on Monday? Where is that money coming from? And if we don't spend it on a dusk to dawn there, then it is available to spend on a site somewhere else?
The money, the $300,000 that you approved in supplemental budget, is intended for this purpose.
So it's only going to get us through April. That leaves us 8 months with $76,000. That doesn't seem really cool, especially since cold weather's going to come back around.
Can I add one thing? I also want to say that part of the budget that you approved also included the $8.6 million for the Community Safety Initiative, and within that funding block, there's money for dusk to dawn, car camping, rest stops, continuation, and the possibility for the dusk to dawn program to be year-round. So there's funding in there to continue the program.
So this is just extra money we're spending for 4 months. You know, it's $250,000, and we've got $1 million in the bridge fund for homeless stuff. So I'm just concerned about spending that much money for maybe 80 people and then having all these other people that we won't have resources for. I'm really concerned about the effect on the businesses out there. I know we seem to have difficulties with NIMBY, but this is a real effect, and I don't want people going out of business or not being able to sell whatever because of this camp. So I have a lot of concerns about the way it is now, but I think that would happen with any place where you put 100 people in such a tiny spot. So I wonder if there's some way, instead of a dusk to dawn, we could find another site, same amount of time, temporary, do both of them till April, maybe on eWeb land. So we could keep some kind of self-managed model and remove some of these safety dangers from that site. And you did say that you didn't put time really into seeing how we could keep it self-managed. I know the homeless have been asking for a long time to have more self-managed spots, and they don't necessarily want to have 100, 300 people there. They've asked to do small sites, like say 6, 7 people who already agreed to live together in a small site with a porta potty. And I think that's something we really need to explore. How big are those cubbies where you can keep your stuff all day long? Because that leaves you with not much stuff.
3 by 3.
My understanding is they're 3 foot by 3 foot. I haven't seen them personally, but that's my understanding. But again, there is some overflow space for bikes and other items as well.
And your tents and your baby pictures and all that stuff. It just seems kind of like to make people downsize quite a bit. I'm really concerned that no one with dogs can be there. I think that's a critical thing. Are there any other providers besides St. Vinny's community-supported shelters in Nightingale? And we need more. Nobody can take it all, and people complain that St. Vinny's raking in our dollars. So I think we need to look at that. I might need a second round. Thank you.
Okay, Claire.
Thank you, Mayor. And I really appreciate the conversation, and Councilor Simple and Councilor Ye both spoke to some of the things I was going to ask about. What would happen if we did not designate it as a dusk till dawn? Is there some room in this situation to provide for self-management of the site with perhaps a contractor who provides case management? I think, these are compelling ideas and suggestions that folks who are without shelter have suggested to us, and we have 2 sites right now. We have a Nightingale Rest Stop and Opportunity Village that are both self-managed, but I also recognize that particularly for Opportunity Village, it took a lot of work and concerted effort to bring it to a place where that was working. So I don't know that it's practical for us to try to apply that model to this particular site right now in this winter, which is unfortunate. And I think we as a city, as we look at these programs, I think we have an obligation to try to be more responsive to what we've heard from folks about the idea of self-management. And maybe there is an opportunity for another dusk till dawn site to do that. And, I realize we can't satisfy everyone's needs in terms of what kind of space they might be willing to inhabit in terms of a sanctioned shelter location. But I think we have room in our current strategies to provide space for trying to find ways that we might expand self-management opportunities for people who are staying at our sanctioned sites. So I guess I didn't hear exactly, others asked a version of this question, but what would happen if we didn't approve the dusk till dawn for this spot? What are the county's intentions? And please keep in mind, I don't have a timer, so if I start going over, someone will have to interrupt me.
Got 50 seconds.
Councilor Syrat, this is Christy. What we have been in conversation and ongoing partnership with our colleagues at the county for a couple of months now, working as we work to transition the campers from the butterfly lot and also kind of think about the best solution for the interim of this site. As you may recall, one of the things that we're thinking of at the county in particular and the city is supportive is thinking about this site as a longer term, low barrier supported shelter site. And so it is a site that we have a high level of interest in and being partners. If council decided that this site wasn't designated for dusk to dawn, as I mentioned early on, is that this is Lane County property. And so Lane County could decide to do some other option of a program. And our intent has been, unless we're directed to do otherwise, is to continue to be good partners in trying to find ways to help support the unhoused in a fashion that makes sense, and again, is really focused on the safety and security of the surrounding area, the business owners, the residents in that area, as well as the campers.
So would they close it down?
We have not had any discussion along the lines of closing anything down. What we've been talking about is transitioning the site.
But that's on the assumption that council is going to approve it for a dusk till dawn or a rest stop?
No, from the time that the campers moved over, there was always this 30 to 60 day plan that the site would transition into something a little bit more stable and structured.
Okay. So real quick, if we do designate it as a dusk till dawn, I do think there needs to be accommodation for any residents who might actually have a night shift job. We do know that there are folks there who work, and it is possible they may work through the middle of the night, and then they need to sleep during the day in order to be able to go back to work the next day, and that, I think, needs to be accommodated. And lastly, I want to say I think it's premature for us to be broadcasting that this is going to be the site for a future permanent shelter. I understand the county has that interest, but I think that discussion of the location of where that building is going to go needs to be a much more informed discussion that this council is a part of.
Manager, do you want to speak?
Just real quickly, Mayor, listen to a couple pieces of the conversation. Emily's comment about self-managed smaller sites. One option that maybe we could take a look at is the car camping program right now allows up to 6. You can be in a car, you can be in a Conestoga, or you can be in a tent as well. It's currently managed under St. Vinny's, but we could also take a look at is there a possibility with a car camping site to sort of try a self-managed within those parameters of 6 or less, which would, I think, dovetail a little bit what you were talking about. So that may be something we could think about as well.
Okay, Betty.
Okay, thanks. My first question was what will happen if we don't approve it, and I guess we really don't know. The question's been asked again. Another question, are we going to store shopping carts, which we know are stolen property?
We don't have any intention of storing stolen property. And so I think when Becky was referring to shopping carts, sometimes people have different kinds of carts that they use, so.
Okay, thanks. I was concerned about that. And then why do people have to leave during the day? Is that because there wouldn't be any supervision? Or if this is where there's living in a sense, they should be able to go back, I think, during the day.
I think it's a matter of staffing and supervision, as well as because it is just tents and an open area, there's not the services that the Lindholm Center provides, and I think the goal is for individuals to have access both to the day-to-day needs services as well as to be able to access and connect with service providers to assist them in moving along the continuum.
No, but why can't they go back is what I mean. They could go out and connect with services. Then why couldn't they go back to the camp and take a nap or whatever?
So when the program that was established and that's in the code is this program. It's the Dusk to Dawn program that establishes certain hours of operations, and the code provisions that council put in place provide those hours. So that's what the county is requesting to operate this under, is that existing program that had those provisions already in them. As you remember, the rest stop program was designed under a certain kind of model, and the Dusk to Dawn program was designed under a different one. But it's specific to the code sets the hours of operation for something operating under a Dusk to Dawn program.
But we could change that, I assume.
Through a code amendment.
I mean, okay, thanks. I just think everyone likes to leave their home, but you'd like to have a place to go back to. And the Lindholm Center is not, I've been there, it's not big enough for all those people to stay in all day, I don't think. And the time I was there, I was on a tour. I don't remember how I got there, but I know they had run out of shower possibilities for the day. And there were people coming in who had hoped to have a shower, and they had given out all the times. So I don't think that, and you add a lot more people, I don't know how they're all going to fit in. And I'm sure the same thing must happen with laundry opportunities. I don't know, but I didn't see room for 100 people to sit in there even. And the question about that picture, is that a heated place?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
And that's on the site?
correct. It's on the current Dusk to Dawn site that's just north of where this is.
And but they can't go there during the day. They could go there at night. Okay, thanks. And let's see, there was something else. Oh, are we working on getting getting state support at all? I mean, everybody who's here in Eugene did not live here and then become homeless. We know that. And we can't take care of everybody. I wonder if we have any efforts currently to get state support.
It's definitely an interest of ours, and we obviously work for state support in other areas related to housing, and I think there's an interest to see what options might be available to help us with this more emergency type shelter need.
People who were alive before the Reagan years remember that there used to be poor farms and poor houses, and they were not supported by the local community where they existed. In Illinois, I remember there was Anna and there was Alton, I think, and if someone was acting, I don't know what word I want to use, but you might say you may have to go to Anna, meaning you'll have to go to the institution, but it was good that we had those. And then my last question right now is,
6 seconds.
I think there is,
You have 6 seconds.
6 seconds? Well, I can ask that in 6 seconds. Isn't there empty space in the jail? I don't mean for jailing people. I mean for resting, sleeping.
Well, I would say that is run by the Lane County Sheriff. And the Lane County Sheriff, we've had numerous conversations even around how do we make more jail bed space available. That's a much larger conversation, and we have not had any discussion about it.
Thank you.
Okay, it is 7 minutes to 1. We have another very large topic of conversation. I have 2 counselors in the queue, and I'm going to make a couple of comments before we do that. And the 2 counselors, I'm going to cut you back to a lightning round of 1 minute for your questions. Just a reminder of the framework here. We are talking about a winter strategy, sheltering strategy. It's temporary. It is, there is no intention of kicking people out. Everybody who is on that site has the opportunity to stay there. It's warm, it's dry, it's heated, and it's connected to services. So when we talk about reducing suffering in our midst, we are talking here about something that is healthy and safe for people, even if it's not their preferred strategy. Some of the people who are camping will find themselves at the Egan Warming Center when the weather gets cold. And if they're at the Dusk to Dawn, they won't need the Egan Warming Center. So just remember the larger context in which this is happening. Okay, I have Emily and then Alan, and a minute, lightning round, okay?
So it sounds like there's no way we can keep this as a full-day site, so they can stay there, but not in the daytime. And a lot of people do need a place to stay at night and aren't able to run around. If we do have a rest stop and not a Dusk to Dawn, who will run that? Will that be St. Vinny's? And my biggest thing is this started with downtown campers, and we've now abandoning that whole thing instead of, a day center and a Dusk to Dawn. And we're spending money on it. So, and we're supposed to decide with only one side being explored of what will happen if we do it and not what will happen if we don't. So that's a difficult position to be in to make a decision. 45 seconds.
Well done. Alan.
Oh, there were some questions embedded in there.
Yeah.
Do you want to respond to?
No.
On the question around the transition, I feel like I've provided the best answer that I can at the table today. If council chose not to provide for the site to be a Dusk to Dawn site, then we'll go back and we'll work with our county partners and figure out what is the right transition strategy. And so.
So on a rest stop, can people use it during the day?
The rest stop site, currently in our conversations with community-supported shelters, they typically close between the hours of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. With the understanding that there are sometimes accommodations made if someone's ill, et cetera. So, and there are some people that work on site as well.
Yeah, but they basically work like a Dusk to Dawn site.
Similar, yes.
More or less. Okay. And if we were to, so I'm not sure what the difference is between a rest stop and, except for size, in this case. One of the other things I wanted to just mention yet again is that seems to be an incorrect notion that if we increase services, we get more homelessness people. Provide the services and they will come. If that were true, while we were increasing our services and doing all these great things from 2009 to 2014, when we saw the data, we actually had a steep decline in the amount of homelessness in our day counts. Pretty dramatic, actually. So we had, as we were increasing services, we had a decrease in the amount of homeless in our community. And as to whether or not, if they're all from here, the answer to that is no, but the studies that we saw is that the vast, vast majority of them are from here. They're not from other places. So this is something to keep in mind.
Okay, I think we're ready for a vote. So you want to put a motion on the table?
Not really, but I will. Move to allow the operation of a Dusk to Dawn and/or rest stop at 525 Highway 99.
Second.
All in favor? Claire, is that a
I vote yes.
yes? No other yes votes? One yes, all opposed? Okay.
I can't see how everyone's voting.
There's 6 opposed. One, you're the lone yes, 6 opposed. Okay, so we will leave that to the county to figure out how they're going to manage and hope for health and safety.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we are now going to go into the next round. So I'm going to establish a couple of, try to walk through a couple of parameters because this is a big issue and we have a short amount of time. So we are coming back to the Housing Tools and Strategies report. There were 2 pieces to it. You've received some information from the city manager in the interim. I'm hoping that everybody has that copy of the matrix. Does everyone have a copy of the matrix that the manager sent in an email to you?
Should have been at the table.
Got it, it's back at that.
Got it. It looks like this here. Okay.
I didn't get that.
So,
Did just now.
so a couple of pieces. First of all, I really want to apologize for how rushed this has felt and for whatever my role has been in that, of feeling like we have dumped you with too much information to process in too little time. And I would say that the one learning curve that I take away from this process is that midway through the Housing Tools and Strategies workshops, when we had done 2 workshops and gave you an update, we should have been very, very explicit about what you are going to receive within a 6-month time span and what was going to take a little longer to return to you. And that might have enabled you to have questions answered at that time and not felt so besieged by information that you didn't have time, didn't quite meet your expectations. So our endeavor today now is to reset a little bit, slow down the conversation and work in some smaller pieces and allow for time to review. And I want to do this in 2 parts, starting with the first piece, which is the administrative fixes that in response to the meeting on Monday night, the staff took that list of the 29 possible actions that had support by both stakeholder groups, the Housing Tools and Strategies and the Better Housing Together, and they sorted them. And so the top section of that matrix are those administrative fixes, which are things that staff can do. Council does not have to vote, review code, do anything else to make those happen. What I am proposing today is this doesn't actually require a vote from you for staff to proceed on those things. They can simply proceed. What I'm proposing today is that you just take this work session time to look at that top part of the matrix, those 11 or 12 items that are there, ask whatever questions you need to ask about what those are and what that would involve. And we will come back with the next sections at work sessions in the beginning of 2019. So I will go through. I can pick up where we left off. I have a copy of the queue from Monday night. I can pick up where we left off if you need me to.
Yeah.
Or I can start a new queue. And so I'm asking you, just look at that top section. We'll just enable staff to move forward on those administrative fixes.
Could someone read those?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so Mike, I had you at the top of the queue, but I also had you checked off as having spoken. No, that's not that queue. This is from Monday. I have Greg, who is not here yet. Claire, Alan, Jennifer, and Emily were in the queue from Monday night.
We were in round 2.
We were in round, okay. I put you in parentheses here because I wasn't sure where you stood.
Yeah.
So I can go back to that queue.
So it was Mike.
I'll work it through the way I normally do. So Mike, Greg, if he shows up, Claire, I'll just work it through. And again, let's just talk about these top pieces.
Could we read the whole thing so that people know what we're talking about?
Yes.
I mean, have somebody read them aloud, I mean.
Okay. All right. Streamline, speed up the permitting process, prioritize staff dedicated to the building and land use permitting processes for certain housing types. Number 2, use data to improve decisions and understand impacts. Number 3, encourage participation in neighborhood associations so they are more representative of the people living in the neighborhood. Number 4, help low and moderate income households purchase a home, such as navigators to support the purchase process and down payment assistance. In other words, help more people move up the ladder. Number 5, create a housing action plan. Number 6, build capacity with building industry to encourage missing middle housing. Number 7, standardize erosion control, consistent requirements. Number 8, streamline trench inspection process. Number 9, coordinate fee collection, permitting with eWeb. Number 10, coordinate fire, wastewater, building inspector joint review of why building sites are not feasible for development. Number 11, create process for timely completion of environmental review to reduce delays. And number 12, develop city processes and culture that guide housing projects to successful outcomes, not only regulate. So, Mike, you're first.
Thank you, Mayor. I would say that seeing as it doesn't require us to vote, that 1 through 12 are items that you can continue to do. Okay, awesome. I don't know what some of these actually mean. The devil's in the detail of almost every kind of proposal we're talking about. And some of them concern me a little. The ones that say encourage participation in neighborhood associations so they're more representative of all the people living in the neighborhood. That sounds awesome. Get more people involved. That's great. I don't know what that looks like on the ground and what it does to those who are already participating in terms, does it marginalize their voice or what? I mean, I don't even know what it does, and I don't know what it is. So I guess as a goal, I'm fine with that. I want to return to my comments from the other night, though, too, as well, because that was the reason I asked to be in the queue. These are fine. These are good. These are progress. Let's do these. That's awesome. Several of the things we're talking about, though, are actually taking us farther away, in my opinion, from a solution to the actual problem and moving us in the wrong direction. That's my biggest concern. And when I look at item on this list that I think is a really good one, number 5, create a housing action plan. What sort of housing do we need? And in our community, we have the highest poverty rate and the lowest home ownership rates for any of a similarly or mid-sized city in Oregon. That's the actual problem. And for us to be looking for ways to create more government subsidized rental housing and making that makes that problem worse. The problem we have is the poverty rate and not enough people own homes. Those two things are correlated. When we're creating this number 5 goal, my hope would be that some of the reasonable goals there would be how do we make it easier for people to own homes. It was also interesting to me to see that in the consultant's report, we have more middle-sized housing than any community our size in Oregon. So when we talk about missing middle housing, we have a larger share of it than any other city in Oregon our size. And so I'm hoping we're going to solve what the actual problem is. The actual problem is housing being built affordable enough for people to purchase so that we alleviate homelessness and poverty. Now, 50% of the cost of building a new home to purchase is controlled by the people at this table. The cost of land and the cost of permits and fees add up to about 50% of the cost of homes for purchase. And we have direct impact on those fees. My hope is that we will do things that make it less expensive to buy houses and get the community out of poverty.
Okay. I am going to make a request of council that you look at these 12 items on the matrix. We will talk about those larger picture issues another time, but I'm wanting to give staff a green light that they can go ahead and have your blessings to do this and be able to say that clearly to the public. So then please, it is, I know, but all right. Claire.
Thank you. So I'm going to pick up from what I was going to say the other night, so it might not be as coherent in context as I might like it to be, but I do have a question. There was some discrepancy in the information we received around how much of various housing types are comprised in the city of Eugene. So on page 54, it says 16% of our housing stock is duplexes, fourplexes, semi-detached. I don't have the whole list in front of me. And on page 118, it says it's 28%. So I am not sure which of those figures is correct or if neither of them is correct. So I don't know if anyone can answer that.
Can we dig for that answer, then answer it here in a second? Folks are kind of looking at it right now.
Sure, thank you. So I think the 12 strategies at the top of that list make sense to go forward on. I think, there's a lot of stuff in our packet that we could onboard later. Thinking about mortgage assistance, I'm glad it's there. This could be a revolving fund that we set up. I think we would also want to do a similar thing for renters. Not everyone wants to be a homeowner, or it's not a time in their life to become a homeowner, yet they need housing. And so could we set up a revolving fund that provides first-last security deposit assistance, and could we do that with CET revenue? And then I think increasing funding of our homeowner assistance program. The chart says that we got in the packet that the city has this, but it's underfunded. Was that discussed about increasing funding to that program? I think that should be on the list, and that I think is something a CET revenue source could help fund. Currently, as it's presented in our packet, I feel that the CET amount is set too low, and I think we should consider today whether or not we want to raise it. I do want to remind myself and others that if we take action to move any of these things forward to a public hearing, that we would still have an opportunity to recalibrate what those numbers are after we've heard more from the public about any specific proposals we might put forward. I'm not sure I really like the inclusion of MUPD in this piece of the conversation. I feel like that's a discrete program for a very discrete purpose, and I'm not sure that I support waiving the CET for MUPDs, so I'd want to hear reasons for that. I might be willing to support a partial offset of the STCs, but want more information about what that amount we might expect to bring in from a CET, which we are basically backfilling, as other counselors have pointed out. Thank you so much.
Okay, and just a reminder that all of these longer-term things are really, we're just looking for the go-ahead for staff on these administrative fixes, and this is your chance to get clarification on what those actually entail if you have interest. And then we will come back, and the second round, we'll talk about the CET. So, Alan.
Yeah. I think for future reference, when we come back with this matrix, can you crosswalk these numbers to the numbers in the work group? Like, for instance, number 1 was number 16.
Gotcha. Yeah, I understand.
I had a hard time tracking that. Claire, and I agree with what Claire said. these are fine, but these are all related to home ownership, which is part of the goal, but what we're talking about is affordable housing, not affordable home ownership. So renters and how much they can afford for rent is very much part of this mix, and this whole thing is very little, if any, around renters and how we can help renters. It's mostly geared towards buying homes, and so most of the folks in our town actually rent, and all the low-income folks and the folks that are housing burdened are renters. So we need to shift the focus and bring that part of the discussion back into this. And none of these administrative things really get there. Clarifying questions on this. So number one, streamlining process for certain housing types. Which housing types?
And I would just say that most of these actually deal with a range of all the housing, not just home ownership. So, apartments go through a permit process, cottage clusters, they all do.
Yeah, but that's all new.
Yeah. Yes.
We're talking about renters rent existing things.
Yes.
So this is all about the existing housing stock and whether or not they can afford that too. That's the point about renters, not just new stuff. But what are the certain housing types in one?
The ones that have the potential to be more affordable, I won't use affordable because that's subsidized, but there are certain forms of houses. Smaller units is a perfect example. Cottage cluster type homes, micro units, those kinds of things have the ability to start moving more towards affordability. They're not subsidized housing, but it's a form. It's in a lot of cases it's a form-based type.
Does it include single-family homes?
It could.
Well, what's the determination if it does or doesn't?
I think it's the threshold, the price threshold, as far as being affordable.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I don't know if it'd be hard to get there. If you look at the data, it's going to be hard to get to an affordable, newly built, single-family home in this market. That's very difficult, right, is what the data shows.
This isn't about streamlining the permit process for a $800,000 home.
Correct.
It's about lower priced homes or housing.
I think that generally the improving how developers experience our system. It's the whole system. The time, the complications, the multi-layers, the process, and we would love to improve that entire spectrum so that in the end, we get the full range of housing types that really we've called for in this process. So there is a supply and demand element that benefits the community. The more supply we have, the better chance we have to stabilize prices. So in some respects, all forms of housing bring something to the market. So I won't go as far as say we're not going to streamline for this group, but we will streamline for that group. We might have some advantages for certain types of businesses, but I think we should set a goal to make it more efficient for all types of housing and commercial construction and industrial construction and so forth.
I guess therein lies my whole frustration with this process so far, which is it's not targeted enough for me. We were talking about affordability of housing, and then this morphed into how do we make it easier for housing to get built? And so we're talking about $1 million homes instead of $250,000 homes. So this whole process, I think, needs to be narrowed down and focused on that stuff. I don't disagree that it's beneficial to have the process work more efficient for all homes, but this stuff that we're doing, the priority should be, because we're in an affordable housing crisis, it should be on those lower cost homes and not so much focused on the overall system.
The next layer of work, which we agree has not been done yet, is to analyze why is there a barrier, who benefits from the barrier, what forms of development benefit from removing the barrier, what's the potential fiscal impact, do all of those things so that we can prioritize based on exactly what you're saying. The answer is we haven't done that work yet, and that's our intent in this kind of third phase of the project, is analyze all of these complicated actions to try to figure out which ones help us move the needle on the goals that we have around housing affordability. So I actually don't disagree with you, it's just we haven't done this work yet.
Number 3, which is number 35A. I think what I was thinking of when we were doing this, and I went back and read this, it doesn't really talk about it very clearly, so in our more detailed explanation of these things, but what I was thinking about was most of the homeowners or neighborhood associations are owners. And there's not a lot of renters, for instance. And the majority of people in our town rent. And so I think when we're talking about more representative of the people living in the neighborhood, I think that's what we're talking about. And if we could figure out a way to outreach to renters so that they participate in the neighborhood associations instead of just all the homeowners, that would be beneficial. So that's what I think about that one. And number 4, navigators. I have questions on 4, 6, 7, 8, 11, and 12, but ran out of time.
Okay. All right, Jennifer.
Thank you. I think these 12 were well chosen. I'm not going to pretend to be a complete expert on each one of these. I have no idea what streamlining trench inspection process is, but I assume staff has gone through it, and that's like deep down in the weeds, and I don't need to know. My question is, some of these obviously have a cost associated with them. So if we approve these, am I approving some nebulous cost, or are you coming back with like what that's going to mean later? Like, for example, like the down payment, like is there?
Yeah, and we've been careful not to use implement because that means we're doing every one of these. Some of these we may find a hurdle, a barrier, a dead end because of cost or some other technicality. But our intent is, when we say move forward, is to move forward with these to the greatest extent possible, and assuming we don't find some snag in cost or process or something that just makes it not doable. So that's kind of what we're thinking.
Okay, that sounds great. I'd also encourage you under the number 3 for neighborhood associations. Engagement is not easy, nor is it inexpensive. So I would change that low to at least a medium. But other than that, thank you. I think these 12 are great.
Emily.
Thank you. I don't want to waste any time, and you guys can do this, so let's just get on with it. I do have things to say about the other topics.
Right. Okay, Chris.
Thank you. In the spirit of this being our last meeting, we're going into the holidays, I'm going to spend my time talking about what I'm thankful for. There's a lot here I am thankful for. I am thankful that you recognize this was too big and you're breaking it up into pieces we can manage. I'm thankful that you feel we were moving really fast and that parts of this need to slow down. I am thankful that you were given the instruction to try to come back in 6 months with some things that are actionable. And while they may not be things that I necessarily have to take action on, there are things you're going to take action on. And from that standpoint, I say, great, I've got 12 actionable things. You'll take the action, but action is still action. And so in 6 months, you came up with a dozen. That's great. And I can't wait to get started on the next group, the ones that I can actually have an impact on. And I notice when I look on the right-hand side where it says source, it's either the work group, Better Housing Together, or folks like that. So these are not necessarily 12 things that you would have just come up with on your own. They're things that came up as a result of a community process where we had a work group, we had Better Housing Together, where we had people involved in helping design these 12 actionable things. And I am thankful for that people took the time to get that engaged in it. I'm thankful that we've reached this point where we can actually say, yeah, let's go. And I don't need a vote to do it, but I can say, yes, let's go. And hopefully you will, and this is a very important piece, you will report back your progress on all of these as frequently and as completely as you can, because I'm really interested in knowing how these 12 things pay off. And it won't just be in terms of dollars. I'm also thinking in terms of the payoff for a person who wants to build a home, and dollars is part of it, but also time saved, a reduction in the complexity of the process, getting plans approved, getting permits approved, the time it takes to do stuff. I bring a plan in, you kick it back, I have to bring it back again, you kick it back. And then the certainty that if I want to build something, I'm reasonably certain I can actually get it built. If you can make traction on all of those, to me, that will have been a payoff for creating more affordable homes. The mayor's right. I don't need to get into a debate of what kind of housing or where it needs to be or how many more acres we need to annex or any of that kind of stuff. These 12 things, I don't know if you need a blessing, you need approval. I'm expressing my thanks. Go forth, do good, and let us know how it works. And I absolutely look forward to talking about the next list of things, which does require city council action, and that will hopefully happen as soon after the new year as we can get to it.
Great. Betty.
Thank you. I don't understand all of these, and I don't know what could be hidden in some of them. I do want to be reassured that there's no decision about residency required for an ADU. No, okay. And then I had questions about some of the same ones as Alan. The first one, streamlining. I would assume you'd already be streamlining as much as you could. I don't think you'd need somebody to tell you
We
to
can always do
streamline.
better is my answer.
Oh.
Really, we always should be looking at that and trying to do better. Yeah.
I would think, that just sounds like something you'd ordinarily do as efficiently as possible. And this encouraging neighborhood participation, my question is how?
Yeah.
I mean, I have a suggestion, newsletters for every neighborhood regularly with
That's part of
list
the
of
work.
things council's discussing.
Part of the work is to figure out how. It's a
Okay,
legitimate question.
and create a housing action plan. I don't know what that means. I thought that's what it was all about, but that was my question about that. That was and then number 6, build capacity. What does that mean? How would you do that to encourage missing middle housing?
There's some folks around the country that do this missing middle housing. They've done it very successfully. They have kind of a prototype kind of building form that works in other places, and on our agenda is to bring some of those folks so that we can learn for folks who have done this in other parts of the country. That's an example.
Okay, I guess you would let us know what you're doing then. Number 8, streamline. I do want to know what trench inspection is. Jennifer didn't want to know, but I want to know.
I actually can't answer that because I don't know.
Okay, well, that's number 8 on here.
Ask Public Works.
It's a
I'll ask Sarah. Number 9, what does it mean that you're coordinating fee collection with eWeb? Does that mean there'd be something else on the eWeb bill?
It's 2 separate processes to go through permitting for utility vaults and all those kinds of things that are part of a builder's development process. So it's an efficiency if they could go through one process, not 2, is the general answer.
Oh, okay, thanks. And then number 12, develop a process and culture that guide housing projects to successful outcomes. What does that mean?
I think the last part of that, and we're doing that actually, is develop a culture of partners and problem solvers versus regulators. So, historically, folks see the city and our services as a regulatory function. We're trying to shift that to actually try to help people navigate a really complex system of getting a building permit and try to help them problem solve. And that gets us out of the regulation mode and develops a culture of helping people.
That could be comparable to community policing, helping people.
We're already doing that, yes.
Right? Thank you. That's all.
Okay. Everybody's had a chance to speak who needs to speak to this. It is 1:24. So I think I think it would be constructive to just have a show of hands that people are comfortable enough with this list to say to staff, go forth, work on these things, come back and tell us how it's going. Yes, you have a question?
Yeah, my question is, what are you going to do?
No, there's not a queue. I'm not starting another queue.
I guess I need some clarification on what that means. What are you going to do with this list? And is it going to come back to us? Are you going to just implement them? Or?
I think, as Councilor Pryor has suggested, our intent is to come back and report on the progress. We're going to start doing this work, which means we have to have a point person that starts working with all of our departments and everyone who touches these processes and start moving the needle on all of those. And we have to come up with a plan of how to do that work. And with your support, that's what we will do. We will start digging into each one of these and seeing how far we can get in as short a time period as possible.
So before I can say yes to that, which I think most of these are good. I don't understand them all, so hopefully some of that is investigation, bring back to us, and then report on that. But number 11, whenever I say here, create a process for timely completion of environmental reviews to reduce delays. Yeah. In a Trump era, that means eliminate the environmental reviews. So I'm skeptical. I don't know what that means.
We're
I'm not
referring,
sure, I know you don't mean that, but
This
that's
came
what
from-
comes up for me in
this
this.
came from our partnering affordable housing providers, folks like Cornerstone and Homes for Good and St. Vincent de Paul. They have to go through a federally required environmental review process, and it takes a long time. So whatever efforts we can make to speed that up would be very helpful for them, because time is a cost. They're
Without
complicated.
short shrifting the review.
We can't, the federal government won't allow us to do that. So it's really up to us
Really
to
about federal.
streamline it, yes.
Thank you.
Mike, did you have a
Yeah, I
process
do. It was
question?
mentioned by several, and I didn't actually get an answer. I want it before I vote. What problem are you solving by creating a housing action plan? Because that sounds pretty specific. What problem are you solving with that action plan?
From my perspective, we have to figure that out. We haven't written the plan yet, but we have a lot of good data that's come forward as far as, and we saw it on Monday, as far as what can people afford to pay, and what target types of housing units are we really striving, and how do we get there? And so the
May
problem
I jump
we're
in just real quick here and just say,
Yes.
that's why the motion I made for this work in the first place was very specific about bringing back to us the specific evaluation of how to make housing more affordable, available, and diverse in type. That's a specific goal to solve a problem of unaffordability. So I'm saying, what's the problem you're solving with? If you come back with a big plan, I want to know why. What problem will
Housing-
that plan solve?
Housing affordability is the answer to that.
There we go.
But it's complex, so it's going
Is
to
it
take
more
some
than
time
that?
to work through that.
Availability.
Because I don't want staff to go off solving a problem that I don't think we have.
There's other parts of it. Obviously, wage levels play into housing affordability, but at this point, we haven't drafted an outline of what that plan looks like, but our intent is we need a plan of how to make a dent, move the needle on housing affordability in Eugene, and that's the intent of the plan.
Okay, I can support that. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a motion if you'd like.
I don't know that we need a formal vote on this. We can, or we can just have a show of hands.
We've gotten into trouble with that.
Okay. You want a formal motion? Go for it. Okay.
I move that we direct the manager to move forward and move forward with continued work to implement these first 12 items.
Second.
How about implement and investigate? Because he said, I don't know if we're going to implement.
Right, you investigate, right.
These are written as anything that comes back to us. So I'm fine with implementing that.
Are we clear, legal counsel, on what that motion says?
No.
Okay.
I think what I heard him say is move to direct the city manager to move forward the 12 administrative items listed on December 11, 2018 proposed action matrix.
Period. Yes.
Okay. Your question?
I'm a no vote until I understand what move forward means.
So what we're going to do is take these things and try to implement them all, because they're administrative, two, they're what a broad range of people said this actually would help in a variety of ways. And so we will endeavor to actually implement all of these things. It's possible that as we go through that, there is something that either is a showstopper, or it's possible in one of these, something would have to come back to council because it requires council action. But our intent is to implement them administratively as we go through this. So that's, and report back on how we're doing with that and what the impact is on that.
Okay, are we ready for a vote?
We get a second.
We did, Betty seconded. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Claire?
I vote yes.
7, that is great. Thank you very much. To go forth with council's blessings. The second piece of this is the construction excise tax. It is now 1:30. That's a long conversation. So I am going to suggest that this is a topic that we will have to act on in the beginning of January. I think that's just where we are. I think everyone is going to need to take time. Hopefully that'll give you time to process this material again before we come back, and we'll just try and put it at the top of the agenda in January. Make sense to everybody?
Yeah, the one other item that.
Oh, but I do have this other thing, so don't walk away just yet, Mike. So we will need, going back to your vote on the Highway 99 location, you need a vote on whether or not the city is authorized to spend the money in support of the county's effort at Highway 99 to transition and manage the site differently than it is currently operating. So if
The monies you approved earlier this week specifically talked about dusk to dawn out on that site. For that side of it, there are other pieces. We're expanding the current dusk to dawn. You've already appropriated dollars for those differently, so we just need to know if you want us to spend money on any of that transition or not.
Okay, so what would this motion say exactly?
So it really would be a motion authorizing the city manager to expend funds at 525 Highway 99 to partner with the county in their transition of the site.
Okay, can you put that motion on the
Transition
table?
to what?
This is going to require a debate, and we don't have time.
We've just debated it, and so the question is, you've already appropriated funds on Monday to use at Highway 99, but now you withdrawn the authorization for a dusk to dawn. Is that right? Did I get that right?
If you take no action, we would, based on the action that you took on Monday, which is to, and good, Christy's coming up, you know, the action you took on Monday was for dusk to dawn, use of money, I think it was $300,000 on that site for dusk to dawn. Since you did not approve the dusk to dawn, we interpret that to mean there is not money designated to be
Counties
spent at that site.
should pay for it.
Can I just add one comment to build on what Catherine said, is that some of that money is being intended to use for the Lindholm Center to provide services for the people at the camp. So it wasn't all for the sleeping portion of the dusk to dawn site. So if we do not get authorization to use any of that money, we need to know specifically, is it for the dusk to dawn or the Lindholm or both? Just to be clear.
We have to vote before we break. Sorry, we have to vote on this before we leave.
Can we
So
divide it and just say we'll do less?
answer, can we divide it and say we'll do less?
I think it's what depends on what your intent is. But the vote you just took earlier today said we are not supporting, or you're not supporting a transition to a dusk to dawn out at that site. And therefore, the money that's appropriated to transition to a dusk to dawn, unless you say we are authorized to support the county in that effort. So, for example, to share in a contract with St. Vinny's, if we don't get an affirmative to spend that, we will tell the county we aren't participating in a contract with St. Vinny's for that transition. And then if the intent is, however, to spend dollars to support the Lindholm Center, regardless of what happens, I don't know how much that is of that dollars, then it would be good to know that as well. And then we would say we would participate in expanding Lindholm operations as part of their day center operations.
Alan?
So I think the council's universally in favor of that site and the work with St. Vincent de Paul and Lindholm. The problem is with the definition of a dusk to dawn site and kicking people out and not having them come back. So I guess the question would be, if we authorize monies to keep that site, to work on that, to operate that site, with the caveat that we didn't like the dusk to dawn, what are you going to go tell the county when they say we want a dusk to dawn? Because that's why this issue came up.
I think what,
and if they say, well, if we're not going to do dusk to dawn, we're not going to do it.
That's possible. It's also possible that they would continue to move forward with St. Vinny's not under the umbrella of a dusk to dawn, so it's not sort of our sanction, so they can continue to do that. That transition, my understanding they could change would be to have a contract with St. Vinny's, which would not necessarily allow people not a part of that, what previously would have been called the dusk to dawn, to not be available to be on the site or to not allow them on the site. That's possible as well. And so I just want to make sure we get clarity on which parts of any or all of that that you're okay with us spending money on.
What I would like to see happen there is contract with St. Vinny's, put up the mass style tent, have 80 people there, but not necessarily as a Dusk to Dawn site.
We could support that piece, and if the county chooses to keep other campers on the site, they can, or if they choose not to, we're still supporting the St. Vinny's contract. That's what, I just want to make sure if that's where everybody is or not. I'm just.
Can we divide it?
Yes, you're on.
So here's the thing, let's be real clear. As soon as anybody, whether it's the county or the city, hires St. Vinny's, they will kick out several members of that camp because they can't be there for life. And that means those folks are going somewhere. And again, my question, what's our backup plan? And I think there are a number of people that several of us have interacted with and had conversations with that you need to know those folks are then kicked out as soon as St. Vinny's is hired to take care of that. So that's part of it for me. No, I don't want us to spend that money. I think St. Vinny's is awesome. I think they're doing a particularly great job. I think this particular situation is not managed well under this circumstance. And I think we need a different answer. That doesn't fit well into the time we are now out of, but that's where we are.
The default function for us will be not to spend any money out there because that's the,
right.
So we wouldn't be participating in a contract with St. Vinny's. We would have to think about I would guess we could spend some dollars on the Lindholm side of it, but on the other side, we wouldn't spend any dollars in that.
I personally would make a motion, since I still have a couple seconds here, I would make a motion that, I don't know what the number is, so I'm going to try and come up with something to say that I think will be appropriate there. I'm going to say I move to authorize spending, the manager to spend sufficient money to enhance the operations of the Lindholm Center by up to 100 people. If there's better language, then give it to me.
How about a
No money to spend on the site.
If there's better language, give it to me.
I don't know that I have better language, but I just wanted to provide some clarity. I think that portion of the service is $76,000 to $80,000 is what we're projecting.
Okay. I make a motion to authorize that. If there's a second, I'll speak to it.
Second.
I think it's a good idea that what you're saying is right. There are people out there. There are people in need out there. That particular facility is not sufficient to the needs of the number of people there, and we can help and we should. I think the county should step up to other parts of this. I don't know whether they will, but I think they should. So I'm in favor of us doing this part.
Okay, so Alice, so the motion on the table is what exactly now?
It is to authorize the expenditure of up to $100,000 for Lindholm, to support Lindholm services.
Up to 100 people.
Up to 100, oh, I'm sorry, up to 100 people.
I'd rather have it be a discrete money amount.
Okay.
100,000.
Take a friendly,
I'll take a friendly of 100.
Up to $100,000.
Up to 100,000. Okay, and that, do we have a second? Will you second that amended? Okay, are we ready to vote? No.
I don't know what this means for the $58,000 for the tent and the heaters and the lighting and all that stuff. And what does it mean for our participation in the campsite?
My question exactly.
That my interpretation of this is that number goes to zero and we're out. And then the county says, you're out, we're out. We're shutting it down.
I'll be happy to answer that if it's a question.
Emily?
Can we lend that to them? We still own it until we need it for something else.
No, we haven't bought it.
We can do any.
No, we spent the money on the tents already and the heaters that they're using. So can we let them keep using it?
It's not, it was going to be, it was purchased for purposes of operating a Dusk to Dawn at the City Hall site. And so when it was to operate the Dusk to Dawn at the 99 site, the heaters and the tents were going to just be used at that site. So since there's not going to be a Dusk to Dawn operating at that site, without specific direction to just say, county, those tents and heaters are yours for the using, we wouldn't be doing that.
Does that mean we take them away from Camp 99 right now?
They're not out there right now.
Oh, I thought they were out there.
No, they would be set up as part of
The new Dusk.
transition to
Okay.
the new Dusk to Dawn. The existing Dusk to Dawn that's further up on 99 has the tents and the heaters and all that.
Those
We're
would
not
be
taking
managed,
those
which
away.
They're not going to be.
So they're not in storage, they're being used.
No, they are not being used right now.
Well, great, they can come downtown.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table, up to $100,000 to support expanded services at Lindholm. Are we ready for a vote? All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opposed? 1. Claire?
I vote yes.
Okay, 6 in favor, 1 opposed. That gives us enough clarity.
I just think we should just shut down the camp.
I think we did too, but that was your.
We just
but
shut
that-
down the
that
camp,
was-
and
that
that's why I
was-
voted no.
That was your vote earlier. Okay, we are adjourned. I think.